Welcome back to Crime Documentary Files. Today we're delving into a shocking case from China. The story of killer couple Lao Rongji and Fa Ziying, who carried out a series of horrific crimes over several years. While Fa Ziying ultimately faced justice, the beautiful demon Lao Rongji vanished like a ghost. Could she escape the punishment of the law? Let's uncover this chilling case. Lao Rongji was born in 1974 in Zhujiang, Jiangxi Province, China. She was the youngest of 5 siblings, with 1 older sister and 3 older brothers. From an early age, Rongji was renowned for her beauty and academic excellence, beloved by both teachers and classmates. After completing middle school, her outstanding performance qualified her for admission to a prestigious high school. However, due to family circumstances, she chose instead to attend Zhujiang Normal College's vocational teaching program. In 1992, at age 18, Rongji graduated and successfully became an elementary school teacher, earning 300 yuan, approximately $40, per month. With a keen interest in fashion, she spent most of her salary on clothing. Life continued this way until she met the man who would change her destiny. In 1993, before turning 20, Rongji met Fa Ziying, a man 10 years her senior, at the wedding of a vice principal's son. Fa Ziying came from dire poverty. His father was a rickshaw puller, while his mother stayed home caring for 7 children. The entire family of 8 lived in a cramped 400-square-foot apartment next to a public restroom. Perhaps due to these circumstances, Fa Ziying showed little interest in education, dropping out after 3rd grade. By age 15, he was sentenced to 3 years in juvenile detention for robbery. The rehabilitation failed. Shortly after release, he received a 10-year prison sentence for robbery and assault. Due to good behavior, he was released after 8 years and began doing business. While most people would have been cautious of such a criminal record, Rongji, an elementary school teacher, found herself drawn to Fa Ziying. The very night they met at the wedding, Fa Ziying gave her a ride home on his motorcycle. That moment sparked Rongji's deep feelings for him. Despite knowing he was married with a child, they quickly began dating. During their courtship, Rongji noticed that Fa Ziying always wore the finest clothes and dined at the best restaurants. This stark contrast likely changed her perspective on money, making her feel that a regular salary wasn't enough. After a year of dating, Rongji decided to follow Fa Ziying to seek fortune in bigger cities. She took a leave of absence from her teaching position, and they first went to Shanghai before settling in Shenzhen. However, competition in the major cities was brutal at that time. While everyone came seeking to build their careers, Rongji and Fa Ziying couldn't gain a foothold. When they hit rock bottom, Rongji had to work as a nightclub hostess to survive. After 6 months, during Chinese New Year, they returned to Zhujiang for the holiday. After enduring numerous hardships, Fa Ziying could no longer contain his violent temper. Back in Zhujiang, he got into another fight and stabbed someone. To evade police pursuit, they were forced to flee the city. This departure marked the beginning of their crime spree. In May 1996, Rongji and Fa Ziying arrived in Nanchang, the capital of Jiangxi Province, a prosperous metropolis. After settling in, Rongji began working at a nightclub in July under the alias Chen Jia. But this time, her purpose wasn't simply to earn money. She planned to use extortion schemes to secure large sums. During her employment, Rongji was responsible for identifying and approaching wealthy customers. She and Fa Ziying referred to their targets as monkeys. They quickly identified their first prey, Xiong Qi, age 35. Rongji observed him spending lavishly at the nightclub and learned he was both the CEO of an air conditioning company and owner of a hotel. She began to cultivate his interest. Being exceptionally beautiful and silver-tongued, Rongji quickly ensnared Qi. On July 28, 1996, she invited him to her home. Qi, without any suspicion, readily agreed. He had no idea that once he entered that house, he would never leave alive. The moment Qi entered Rongji's home, Fa Ziying, who had been hiding inside since early morning, held him at knife point and forced him to kneel. Faced with the sharp blade, Qi had no choice but to comply. While Fa Ziying maintained control with the knife, Rongji quickly bound him. They searched him and took everything of value, some cash, a watch, and jewelry. Finding these items insufficient, they forced Key to reveal his home address, planning to search his residence for more valuable items. Key truthfully disclosed his address. After obtaining Key's address, Fa Ziying shot him dead, then searched the body for house keys before dismembering him. They took the keys to verify the address Key had provided. Indeed, the keys opened the front door at that location. During this process, they even encountered Key's neighbors. After checking and returning home, Rongji and Fa Ziying realized breaking into Key's house was too risky. They decided to switch targets to another Monkey, a nightclub owner they planned to lure to their home for similar treatment. However, the owner wasn't available that day, so they reverted to their original plan to break into Key's house. Around 10 p.m. that night, after eating at a street food stall, they went to Key's home. First, they cut the phone line outside his house to prevent his family from calling the police. Rongji suggested cutting the neighbors' phone lines too, but Fa Ziying refused. They then used the key to enter the house. Inside, they found Qiyi's wife and daughter sleeping. Fa Ziying and Rongji woke them up, threatened them with knives, and demanded silence. While Fa Ziying guarded them, Rongji searched the house for valuables. After 2 hours of thorough searching, combined with what they had taken from Qiyi earlier, their total haul amounted to 100,000 yuan, approximately $12,000, including 8,000 yuan, about $1,000, in cash, 15 Hong Kong dollars, $10 in US dollars, 1,000 yuan, about $125 in bonds, a savings account with 95,000 yuan, about $11,000, and various assets worth 30,000 yuan, about $3,750. To ensure their escape and fearing Qi's wife might identify them to police, they decided to leave no witnesses. They killed both his wife and their 3-year-old daughter using the same method they had used on Qi. Rongji suggested burning the scene to destroy evidence and fingerprints, but Fa Ziying refused, believing it would draw too much attention and lead to quick police discovery. To mislead investigators and buy time for their escape, Fa Ziying told Rongji to wait at another location while he moved Qiyi's body from the first crime scene back to his home. The goal was to stage it as a home invasion murder. After completing their tasks, they successfully met at a hospital before fleeing Nanchang together. One day after the murders, police discovered the family massacre. Investigation revealed that a woman named Chen Jia was involved. However, the real Chen Jia was found working continuously as a hostess in Shenzhen, having never left the city. She had only reported her ID stolen. In fact, Chen Jia had been Rongji's former co-worker at a Shenzhen nightclub, and Rongji had stolen her identity. This meant Rongji and Fa Ziying had planned their crimes while still in Shenzhen. Whether due to their misdirection tactics or other factors, it took police 20 days, until August 18, 1996, to identify them as the suspects and release their photos and information to the media. A few days before their crimes were discovered, on August 3, 1996, they returned to Rongji's family home in Zhujiang, gave her mother some jewelry, and stayed several days before leaving. Rongji understood this might be the last time she would see her mother. After leaving Zhujiang, to avoid police detection, they only traveled by bus and boat, never taking trains. They eventually reached Shanghai. During this time, Rongji still regularly called home to talk with her mother. Then one day in September, 2 months after the murders, Rongji called home and barely got out the word mom before her mother said, "You've done something terrible, haven't you?" Without even saying goodbye, Rongji immediately hung up. This was when Rongji realized they were wanted by police. After that call, she never contacted her family again. Her brother later said that no news was the best news. The couple completely vanished, until they struck again a year later. More than a year after the Nanchang murders, having spent nearly all their stolen money, they decided to continue their crime spree in Wenzhou. This time, to avoid police detection, they stayed in separate locations. Rongji adopted the name Gege and began working at a karaoke bar. This time, they didn't need to target customers because they found a more suitable monkey before finding an appropriate client. This was Liang Xiaochun, one of Rongji's fellow hostesses at the karaoke bar. Rongji noticed Xiao Chun's lavish spending and expensive Omega watch, suggesting wealth. Moreover, she learned Xiao Chun's apartment was available for sublease. After discussing it, Rongji and Fa Ziying saw this as a perfect opportunity. They wouldn't need to find a separate location for their crimes, but could strike directly at Xiao Chun's home. So Rongji told Xiao Chun she was interested in renting, but wanted to view the apartment first. On the first viewing, Rongji went alone. Finding the apartment suitable for their purposes, she returned with Fa Ziying for a second viewing on October 10, 1997. Xiao Chun, suspecting nothing, agreed to show them around. Rongji and Fa Ziying brought knives to the viewing. That day, once inside, Fa Ziying held Xiao Chun at knife point, while Rongji bound her and searched for valuables. However, Xiao Chun wasn't as wealthy as they'd assumed, and their take was disappointing. Unsatisfied, they forced Xiao Chun to call a wealthy acquaintance. Left with no choice, Xiao Chun called a karaoke bar colleague named Liu Siqing, known as Sasha. Xiao Chun told Sasha she was feeling very ill and needed her to come over. However, Sasha was busy and couldn't come immediately, so she asked another colleague, Ms. Liu, who lived in the same building, to check on Xiao Chun first. Ms. Liu quickly arrived at the apartment and knocked. Not realizing this wasn't Sasha, Rongji invited her in and led her to Xiao Chun's room. Inside, Ms. Liu saw Xiao Chun lying on the bed, completely covered by a blanket except for her face. She had no idea that beneath the blanket, Xiao Chun was bound hand and foot. When Xiao Chun realized the visitor wasn't Sasha, she quickly said, "I don't know you. You don't need to be here. Please ask Sasha to come instead." Stung by the direct rejection, Ms. Liu angrily left. As she departed, Rongji repeatedly insisted she tell Sasha to come urgently. Sensing something wrong in the urgent tone, Sasha rushed over. Tragically, upon entering the apartment, Sasha met the same fate as Xiao Chun, bound by Rongji and Fa Ziying, forced to surrender all her cash, bank books, and reveal her account passwords. As soon as they had the bank account password, Rongji rushed to the bank to withdraw money. When the bank staff noticed she wasn't the account holder, they questioned her. Rongji claimed she was borrowing money from the account owner. The bank teller, accepting this explanation, simply asked for her signature before releasing the funds. Rongji then called Fa Ziying to report she had successfully withdrawn 25,000 yuan, about $3,000. Upon hearing this, Fa Ziying immediately strangled both Xiao Chun and Sasha with electrical wire. He then met Rongji at their predetermined location, and they fled the city by bus. By now, they had claimed 5 lives. There seemed to be no end to their killing spree. A year after the Wenzhou murders, around July-August 1998, Rongji and Fa Ziying arrived in Changzhou, Jiangsu province. Having spent all their previous stolen money, they resumed their old hunting methods. This time, Rongji worked at a nightclub called Royal Palace. Their new monkey was Liu Hua, an auto repair shop owner. Following their usual pattern, Rongji lured Liu Hua to their place, where he was held at knife point and bound. However, they changed their approach this time. They forced Liu Hua to call his wife, demanding a ransom of 70,000 yuan, about $8,500, to be delivered at a specified bus stop. Fa Ziying guarded Liu Hua, while Rongji went to collect the money. Before leaving, Fa Ziying warned Rongji to be careful, saying he would kill Liu Hua and flee if she didn't return within 2 hours. Liu Hua's wife arrived on time with the cash, then accompanied Rongji back to the location by taxi. Seeing her husband alive, Liu Hua's wife handed over the money, only to be bound herself. After a brief exchange, Rongji left first. About 15 minutes later, Fa Ziying's phone rang. Rongji called to confirm the area was clear of police. When Fa Ziying heard this, he turned toward Liu Hua and covered his head with a black bag. Liu Hua's wife, despite wanting to beg for their lives, could only shake her head desperately, her mouth gagged with cloth. Surprisingly, Fa Ziying didn't harm either of them. Instead, he told Liu Hua, "Your wife has bought back your life," before gathering his belongings and leaving to meet Rongji. According to the victim's later testimony, Rongji and Fa Ziying worked together with chilling efficiency. Though they spoke little, their roles were precisely defined, each knowing exactly what to do. Liu Hua's wife also noted that during the taxi ride back, Rongji was extremely cautious, making the driver circle the area multiple times before being satisfied it was safe. Could this criminal couple be experiencing guilt and planning to abandon their life of crime? However, they were far from finished. On June 21st, 1999, they selected Hefei, Anhui Province, as their next hunting ground. This time, Rongji adopted the alias Shen Lingqiu, while Fa Ziying became Ye Weiqiang. They added a new, sinister element to their scheme before entering any nightclubs. Under the pretense of keeping a large dog, they had a metal cage constructed measuring 3.3 by 3.3 by 2.3 feet. A month later, on July 15, 1999, Rongji began working at the Sanjutian nightclub. She quickly identified a new target, Yin Jianhua, an electronics store owner. After a week of building rapport, she invited him to her home on July 22nd. Jianhua readily accepted, but upon entering he found himself at knife point. Fa Ziying forced him to strip naked and shoved him into the prepared metal cage, wrapping electrical wire around his neck and binding his limbs inside. Fa Ziying demanded Jianhua surrender all his assets. When Jianhua claimed he only had a few thousand in his account and needed to call friends to borrow money, Fa Ziying refused, knowing such calls could alert police. Enraged by what he perceived as Jianhua's lack of fear, believing their victim thought this was just an act, Fa Ziying suddenly left the apartment. When he returned, he brought another man with him. Initially, Jianhua thought this was an accomplice, but Fa Ziying bound this man as well and dragged him into the room. Horrific screams soon echoed from the room. Moments later, Fa Ziying emerged carrying the man's head. The victim was Lu Zhongming, a carpenter Fa Ziying had lured from a construction site with the promise of work. Fa Ziying had murdered him solely to prove to Jianhua they were serious killers. After witnessing this brutality, Jianhua didn't hesitate. He immediately promised them $37,500. He called his wife with instructions to meet Fa Ziying at the Yangtze River restaurant that evening. Under duress, he wrote 2 notes forcing his wife's cooperation. Rongji, dissatisfied with the notes, added her own threatening message. 1 yuan short means death. His accomplice will ensure you die faster than the last one. Fa Ziying then took both notes with him. Jianhua's wife arrived at the Changjiang restaurant on time, but for some unknown reason, Fa Ziying did not show up. Perhaps he felt that the area around the meeting point was unsafe, so he returned to the place where the victim was being held. The next morning, July 23rd, they asked Jianhua to give his home address and write a note. Fa Ziying would go to his house directly. Jianhua, after witnessing Fa Ziying's murder, was very scared to give his home address, even though he knew his wife and children were at home. Fa Ziying told Rongji that if he did not return by 12 o'clock, he should kill Jianhua to avenge him and then escape. When they arrived at Jianhua's house, only his wife was home. It seemed that Jianhua's wife had arranged for the children to leave the house early so that the children would be safe. Fa Ziying showed Jianhua's wife the note written by her husband to prove the purpose of the visit. After Jianhua's wife saw the content saying that she would cooperate but needed to go out to get money, she told Fa Ziying to wait at home and promised to come back as soon as possible. Perhaps because the previous crimes were too convenient, Fa Ziying was complacent. He agreed to let Jianhua's wife go out to earn money while he stayed at home to wait. But Jianhua's wife did not believe that Fa Ziying would release the person after receiving the money, so she chose to call the police. At this time, Fa Ziying was still waiting at Jianhua's house, so confident that he did not expect that what awaited him was not 300,000 yuan, about $36,000, but a police team surrounding him. After receiving the report, the police arrived at Yin Jianhua's house at 11:15 and surrounded Fa Ziying. Facing the dense police encirclement, Fa Ziying chose the last resort. He hid in a corner of Jianhua's house and used a suitcase to cover himself. Because the police still did not know where Yin Jianhua was at that time, they did not dare to act rashly. They needed to capture him alive. After 11:30, the police tried another tactic, using words to persuade Fa Ziying, but only received one sentence: "You brought too few people." Finally, at 12:05, the police decided to fire tear gas into the house. After a while, Fa Ziying, unable to bear the tear gas, ran out of Jianhua's house. However, Fa Ziying still refused to cooperate and exchanged gunfire with the police. After 10 minutes of gunfire, at 12:15, Fa Ziying was shot down and subdued. After being arrested, Fa Ziying was taken to the hospital for treatment. Regarding Jianhua's whereabouts, Fa Ziying still refused to give any information. Later, Fa Ziying said that her real name was Ye Weiming and that she was cooperating with two strangers to commit the crime. After a series of interrogations, he revealed the location of the crime, but the police later confirmed that this was false information. The police were certain that Fa Ziying did this to give Rongji time to escape from Hefei. Finally, 5 days after Fa Ziying was arrested, because the apartment where the crime was committed had a strange smell, the neighbors reported it to the police, and Jianhua's body was discovered. Unfortunately, he had already died by this time. At the same time, the police also discovered the carpenter's body. Rongji had already escaped, leaving behind only a note that read, "Honey, I'm leaving first. I'll wait for you at home. I love you." When the police informed Fa Ziying that Jianhua's body had been found and Rongji had escaped, he finally confessed his true identity and detailed the crimes he had committed alongside Rongji over the years. However, notably after his capture, Fa Ziying claimed they were robbing the rich to help the poor. In court, he even retracted his previous confessions, asserting that he was a professional assassin and that Rongji had nothing to do with the crimes. Ultimately, Fa Ziying was sentenced to death and executed 6 months after his arrest. The other person involved, Rongji, vanished without a trace after Fa Ziying's capture and remained missing until 2019, 20 years later. On the day Fa Ziying was apprehended, Rongji realized he was not returning and decided to flee. That night, she boarded an overnight sleeper bus, traveling across multiple provinces from Hefei to Henan, and then moved on to Wuhan. With the remaining amount of more than 1,000 yuan, approximately $150, she took a train to Dongguan, adopting the alias Shady to return to her old profession as a karaoke hostess. After earning enough money, she relocated to Chongqing. It turned out that Rongji and Fa Ziying had long-term rentals in both Chongqing and Anhui, which they used as safe houses. In case they encountered trouble or became separated, they planned to reunite at one of these locations. The note Rongji had left behind, "I'll wait for you at home," referred to this safe house in Chongqing. Upon arriving in Chongqing, Rongji immediately checked the safe house to see if Fa Ziying had returned. Since information dissemination at the time was far less efficient than today, and they lacked a means of direct communication like cell phones, Rongji was unaware that Fa Ziying had been captured and executed. She relied solely on the safe house in Chongqing for updates. Of course, the outcome was disappointing for Rongji. After spending some time at the safe house without any sign of Fa Ziying, she realized he had likely been apprehended and decided to leave the Chongqing residence. By the year 2000, Rongji had settled in Xiamen, a city in Fujian province. She worked in various entertainment venues such as dance halls, bars, nightclubs, and karaoke parlors. However, without an official ID, she could only take short-term jobs. Later, she tried living in Zhengzhou but discovered that living in cities with high migrant populations was easier without identification, so she returned to Xiamen. Over time, Rongji learned how to avoid police surveillance and began living more comfortably. In addition to working in entertainment venues, she started investing in herself by learning piano, painting, and dancing, seemingly to prepare for a potential career change in the future. Perhaps Rongji was born to excel in the hostess profession. No matter which entertainment venue she worked at, she consistently performed well, attracting a loyal clientele. Her coworkers spoke highly of her, noting her polished social skills. When she joined the True Love Bar in 2016, she even became the establishment's centerpiece attraction. At this time, Rongji was already 42 years old, yet she was prominently featured at the center of the bar's promotional posters, flanked by women in their early 20s. This positioning highlighted both her charm and skills. She reportedly earned at least 10,000 yuan, around $1,500, per month at the time. In addition to her successful career, Rongji also had a colorful personal life during her years on the run. She had at least 3 relationships, one of which lasted more than 5 years. However, the relationship ended because her partner wanted to get married, and she could not provide an ID to register the marriage. Recognizing the age limitations of her profession, she later transitioned to working as a salesperson for cars and watches. She also tried to rebuild her life by seeking employment as a housekeeper. On a job matching app, she even uploaded her photos and personal information, with her profile pinned at the top of the listings. It is difficult to imagine that a woman implicated in 7 murders could live such an audacious life. In stark contrast, Jianhua's family, after his tragic death, lost their primary breadwinner and had to rely on his wife, who worked as a cleaner to support 3 young children and a blind 71-year-old mother-in-law. Rongji believed she could remain hidden and continue living a peaceful life. However, on November 27, 2019, while working at a watch counter in a shopping mall, she was unexpectedly arrested by a large police force. Authorities had tracked her down using facial recognition technology. Initially, Rongji denied her identity after being taken into custody. However, the police promptly conducted a DNA test to confirm her identity, and the results revealed that she was indeed Lao Rongji, the fugitive wanted for years. Her arrest shocked the nation, with discussions of her case dominating social media and news outlets. People were astounded that this seemingly poised and beautiful woman was responsible for 7 deaths. Faced with the DNA evidence, Rongji had no choice but to admit her identity. Tearfully, she expressed regret for her actions and claimed that she was coerced by Fa Xing. She emphasized that she had been just a young woman in her early 20s at the time, unsure of how to handle the situation. "I thought about escaping," she said, "but Fa Xing threatened me. He said he knew where my family lived and that he would retaliate if I ran away. I had no choice but to cooperate. Please forgive me. I was too afraid to confront the truth. I was only 21, not even 22. It was all because Fa Xing deceived me." During the interrogation phase, Rongji revealed that when she and Fa Xing first moved to Shenzhen to start a new life, she brought her graduation diploma and academic certificates with her. She made multiple attempts to secure legitimate employment, but Fa Xing refused to allow it and forced her to work as a hostess in nightclubs and bars. Rongji appeared very earnest in her statements, admitting to her involvement in all the cases, but claiming that she only ever thought they were acts of robbery or extortion, never murder. She asserted that she did not participate in the killings. She was either not present at the crime scenes, or even if she was, she did not witness Fa Xing committing the murders. She stated that had she seen him commit murder, she would have stopped him. These claims seemed to be a calculated strategy. Knowing that the police had substantial evidence of her involvement, she could not deny her participation. However, if her role in the crimes were classified as that of an accomplice, it would almost certainly lead to the death penalty. If she could prove that she was coerced and had a lesser degree of involvement, the sentence might be reduced. In the first case involving the Qi family, Rongji claimed that she was unaware of and absent during the murders of Qi, his wife, and their daughter. She said she had only agreed to assist in the robbery. Regarding her initial confession, where she supposedly suggested burning the scene to destroy evidence, she claimed that the police had coerced her into saying it, and she had never actually made such a suggestion. At trial, Rongji initially appeared frail and subdued. However, her demeanor abruptly changed when the prosecution presented testimony from a landlord who had rented the crime scene property to her and Fa Xing. The landlord stated that the pair seemed like a married couple and that Fa Xing had described Rongji as a bar hostess. Hearing this, Rongji immediately objected, saying, "Fa Xing would never tell the landlord something like that. He wouldn't insult me in that way. Why are they calling me a bar hostess? What evidence do they have for that? Wherever I go, People see me as an educated woman. Where am I indecent? Where am I promiscuous? In the second case involving Liang Xiaochun, Rongji claimed that she genuinely intended to rent a house because staying in guest houses was too expensive. She needed to take Fa Ziying to view the house, but once inside, Fa Ziying noticed Liang Xiaochun's expensive watch and pushed her to the ground. As for the second victim in this case, Rongji stated that neither she nor Fa Ziying was involved and that Xiaochun herself had called this person. Rongji admitted to withdrawing money, but insisted it was under Fa Ziying's coercion. After making the withdrawal, she did not return to the scene and asserted that when she left, both Xiaochun and Sasha were still alive. In the final case involving Yin Jianhua, the prosecution argued that Jianhua was not killed by Fa Ziying, but by Rongji. According to the autopsy report, Jianhua's death occurred on July 24th, while Fa Ziying had been apprehended on July 23rd. Moreover, Fa Ziying had reportedly told Rongji to kill Jianhua if he didn't return, to avenge him. When asked by the police whether Jianhua was already dead when he left the scene, Fa Ziying had enigmatically replied, "Let's not talk about that, okay?" The autopsy report also noted differences in the method of killing compared to previous cases, suggesting that Jianhua's murder might have been carried out by Rongji herself. However, Rongji denied this, claiming she left the scene on the night of July 22nd. Regarding the murder of carpenter Lu Zhongming, she professed ignorance, stating that she had been so frightened at the time that some of her memories were fragmented. Here are Rongji's defenses. However, how can 7 innocent lives be dismissed with a few simple words? Evidence, such as the testimony of the first surviving victim, described how Rongji and Fa Ziying worked seamlessly together with clear role distribution. Moreover, the message written by Rongji to Yin Jianhua's wife also demonstrated her malicious intent. In the end, Rongji was convicted of premeditated murder, kidnapping, and robbery, and sentenced to death. Upon hearing the sentence, she did not show much reaction. Instead, she cried and declared her intention to appeal. "I don't accept this. I believe the law will not wrong an innocent person nor forgive a guilty one. You're asking if I object? Do I want to appeal? Yes, I want to appeal." However, given the overwhelming evidence of her crimes, Rongji's appeal was denied in the lower court, and her original sentence was upheld. On December 18, 2023, Lao Rongji, the perpetrator of multiple murders, was executed. This case leaves behind profound reflections on human nature. Lao Rongji's story resembles a tragic tale of poor choices, from a promising elementary school teacher to a notorious murderer, from simple dreams of a happy life to a series of heinous crimes. Behind her beauty and claims of coercion lay a brutal truth. Rongji was an active accomplice in all the crimes. Innocent victims, from a 3-year-old girl to women who trusted her, were lured into deadly schemes by her and her lover. The tragedy of Lao Rongji is also a story of how one can lose their humanity when consumed by greed and violence. From a beloved teacher to a remorseless killer, the thin line between good and evil becomes terrifyingly apparent. After 20 years of evading justice, she ultimately faced the law, proving that justice, though delayed, is never absent. However, despite the punishments meted out to her and Fa Ziying, the immense losses they inflicted on the victims' families remain irreparable. And that concludes today's case. What are your thoughts on this story? Share them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss out on other gripping cases. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.